Hi, I'm Wade Thomas, and today I want to talk about a subject that I'm just very passionate about. I want to talk about building a culture of compassion and empathy from the heart. And now more than ever in our society, hi, I'm Wade Thomas, and today I want to talk about a subject that I am just very passionate about. Now more than ever, we really need to have compassion and empathy in our society. So much has gone on, so much has happened, and it seems like everywhere you look, we move farther and farther from that. And since a large part of our lives are spent at work, I think that businesses have a responsibility to bring compassion and empathy, to bring a heart-based culture. And that's why today, my presentation is from the heart. I'm going to give you a practical approach to building compassion and empathy in your culture. So first of all, I want to tell you my story a little bit, because part of having compassion and empathy is really understanding who it is you're talking to. So I want to share a little bit about myself, my story. You know, over the past 25 years or so, I've been involved in the talent world. The very first 20 years, I spent working my way up through the human resources ranks. Did a lot of business unit type work, worked in manufacturing plants, automotive. I did home building, more of an office environment, and eventually spent the last 8 years of my HR career as a CHRO at a major public company. And one of the things I learned through this process was that I truly had a passion for helping people and organizations reach their potential, helping them get to where they want to be. And so I made the decision 5 years ago to go off on my own to try to reach even more people, to try to have a bigger impact in people's lives. And that's what leads me to where I am today in my business. So I have 2 kids, you'll see here on the computer monitor. We enjoy things like the beach. I should say also that I'm a Florida native, grew up in Palm Beach County. This beach is actually up in South Carolina. Also like to hike. That's a picture of my kids in Phoenix, Arizona, where I live now. And I also like to ski. And so those are some of the hobbies, and that's a little bit about who I am. So that being said, now that you can empathize with me a little bit, let's jump right into the lesson today. First of all, I want to talk about the benefits of a heart-based culture. We all know that culture is critical for companies to move the organization forward during both good and challenging times both. We often, however, don't think of compassion and empathy as being part of a business culture. But research now has made the connection that shows the tie between compassion and empathy and business success. So here's a few things that, just direct implications to culture. The first one is improved retention and engagement. Employees that are in a compassionate and empathetic culture are likely to stay there for a long time. While they're there, they're likely to be more engaged in the business. They will feel more part of the team or even part of the family. Employees that are part of this culture are going to work that much harder and that much more effectively, take more ownership. Second part of this is a deep customer connection. So when you have a heart-based culture that flows through your organization, you're going to bring compassion and empathy not just to your employees, but also to your customers. And when you can truly empathize with your customers and have compassion when needed, you're going to build incredible loyalty with those customers. They're going to stay longer. They're going to buy more. They're going to be a net promoter for you. They're going to tell people about it. It's such a powerful customer tool. Reduce stress. So what compassion does is it creates space for active communication. So having a heart-based culture, having compassion and empathy in your culture will allow your people the opportunity to vent to their colleagues, to their supervisors, to whoever it might be within the organization. And when they're able to vent and get the stress off their chest, it's not going to build up inside. It's not going to create physical problems for them. It's not going to distract them from their work. It's going to help, again, just really even out the stress level, get people on an even keel, and that in turn is going to make them more effective and more likely to do a great job for your company. The fourth thing on here is it creates trust. When you have a compassionate, a heart-based culture, you're going to find that the trust is created between your employees and a company. And as you probably know, employees who have trust in an organization are going to work harder, work more effectively. They're going to take ownership. Trusting the organization is going to create a lot of positivity. Finally, having a heart-based culture, having an empathetic, compassionate culture is a catalyst for innovation. So when you're in this kind of culture, your people are going to feel safe. They're going to feel more willing to take risks, to take chances. And what that does is it spawns innovation. When you have this culture that really emphasizes this, and it's through all levels, you're going to find the level of innovation in all things you do, big and small, is going to be great because compassion and empathy are truly a catalyst for innovation. But the bottom line here, I said earlier that this is such a huge thing for society today, and that companies may even have a moral responsibility to have compassion and empathy in a workplace. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is it also provides a competitive advantage for your company. So I want to start with talking about what compassion and empathy means. And I'm going to start by talking about what it doesn't mean. And first of all, being compassionate and having empathy does not mean you're soft. Does not mean you have this soft, accommodating, easy culture by any means. A lot of times, those are the words that come about when we say words like compassion and empathy. And that kind of puts a barrier up when you're talking to business leaders because they don't want to be soft. They don't want to be accommodating and easy. That's just not the way we were brought up as leaders. The other thing it's not sympathy. Now, what sympathy is sympathy is understanding someone else's feelings. It's more of a cognitive thing than empathy is. We do get the words mixed up a lot. Sympathy often means pity. What compassion and empathy really mean are that you're understanding and relating to those thoughts. So you're not just aware of them, you're really getting in deep. You're relating to them, relating to thoughts, relating to emotions, relating to the experience of others. It also means you're caring for others. It also means you're selflessly helping others. What's the common denominator in those three statements? We talked about others. And part of what you'll be bringing into your culture is really this focus on everybody else, on the others. Because if everybody focuses on other people, you'll find the organization as a whole becomes very healthy, very compassionate, very empathetic. And one final point here, compassion and empathy are not fixed traits. They can be learned. If given time and support, people can develop and enhance their compassion or empathy. There's tools out there for that. There's training, leadership development, coaching. There's all kinds of things out there that are available that you can really start learning these things when people struggle with it. So the important thing to note is they are not by any means fixed traits. So to start with the heart-based principles. There's 8 of them. And we're going to go through each of these 8 in more detail. But to start with, you want to create an environment for individual success. The second principle is influence over authority. Do not tolerate negative behavior. Communicate with compassion and empathy. Have an abundant mindset. Emphasize compassion over compliance. Focus and be willing to learn from others. And understand that trust is not an entitlement. I've provided a handout that lists these principles out so you can follow along. And below it, you'll also see space that you can make notes and that you can write down things that you're going to bring back to the workplace. Because the one thing that I really want to have happen here, that I'm very passionate about, is I don't want to have this be just another talk out of 15, 20, 30 talks or whatever you're going to have this week. I want you to actually do something with this, because I want you to be able to go back to your organization and make a difference there. I should also note that even though I'm recording this well before today, the chat is open. I'll be monitoring the chat and I'll be answering questions as we go along. So let's start with the very first principle. And I'll let you know ahead of time, this one's a little bit long because this is really one of the keys to the whole thing. And so we're going to spend a lot of time here. And that is, you want to create an environment for individual success, where individuals can succeed. And to do this, you want to start by actively seeking perspective. So this goes beyond just, I want to understand people, or I'm going to ask how your day is. This is being generally curious about where people are coming from. What is their paradigm? Have a hunger to understand more. Never stop asking, and really just dig deep with your people. Don't just ask, how their day is going, but ask what they did, why they did. Really understand what they're all about. Really get that perspective and understand their unique needs and goals. Because when you understand what they need and where they want to go, that really helps you as a company provide the right work experience for them. And the thing about this, the thing about the empathy part of seeking perspective, is this runs contrary to a lot of what business was founded on hundreds of years ago, which is, everybody's kind of one. We have a one-size-fits-all solution. Everybody's kind of in a box. What this is really starting to drive you towards and drive your leaders towards is understanding that people are individuals. And as such, we need to understand them as individuals, because once we do that, we're going to get such a better performance out of them. So a great example I have of this, and this was early in my career, within the first few years, I was a plant human resource manager. New plant manager came in. And one of the first things he did is he brought his leadership team in and said, sometime in the next 3 days, I want you to come in here and introduce your people to me. But I don't want to know their names. I want you to tell me in your own words things about them. And what he was doing there is he was sending that message that the expectation is that we're going to know our people, that we're going to know more than name, rank, title, serial number. We're going to really know them. And so, what really happened, of course, is everybody ran out in the next 3 days and tried to learn as much as they could for their people, which was a very difficult challenge. But the message he sent there is, going forward, this is how we run business. And just a powerful example of sending that message about seeking perspective and making it real in a workplace. The second part of creating this environment is creating psychological safety. Now, people feel psychological safety when they trust that the company is looking out for them. Now, it's really important to know this is not about intent. This is not about vision statements on a wall. No matter how beautiful they are, how fancy they are, and how great the words are on there. It's not about that at all. You've got to have more than intent. It's really about actions and behaviors. It's really about actions, behaviors, and words. You really have to walk the walk here and really provide that psychological safety and build it. And studies show that when workers feel safe, they strive to reach stretch goals, they give more feedback, they're more helpful, they're more creative, they're more innovative. So creating a psychological safety can have a huge impact on your business. Other part of the psychological safety, and this can be touchy for a lot of managers, is you've got to demonstrate the willingness to help employees with not just what's going on in the workplace, but also the personal side. Because, you know, historically, we've kind of thought of work as work and home as home. You shouldn't bring your home to work. And by the way, you shouldn't bring your work to home. But gosh, the reality today is not that at all, right? You know, today we're very much plugged in 24/7. You know, we bring our work home. We all have our devices. We're checking emails, text messages, IMs, Facebooks, Instagrams, whatever we have. You know, we're on that. We're bringing work home with us. By the same token, to think that you can just leave all your personal worries, all your personal concerns, even your personal glories and great things, if you can just leave that at home while you're at the office, that's really unrealistic as well. So leaders really going forward have to have that comfort level with dealing with the personal problems as well, and being supportive and being for their people in all levels. The next part of that, a part of this, is getting into the trenches. You want your leaders throughout the company to immerse themselves in a daily grind from time to time, and to understand that no job is too low. You know, it might mean they go and sweep floors, you know, do the janitor's job for a while, you know, do the administrative assistant's job for a while. Whatever those entry-level jobs are, you know, you want your leaders, you want people throughout the organization to spend some time there, to really understand that, to walk in the shoes of your people. It is one of the best ways to learn and to truly understand and empathize with people's experiences. You know, I saw a great example of this about a year ago. Down the street from me is a coffee shop. And the coffee shop had been under ownership for about 3 or 4 years and sold to a new person. New person came in, and I went into the coffee shop right away, greeted me, went to order my coffee. He took my order. Then he went back and he made it, poured it in a cup. He spilled a little bit, cleaned it up. And so I sat down there in a coffee shop, and I kind of watched what was going on in there. And during that time, and geez, you know, 30 to 60 minutes, it wasn't long. But during that time, I watched him clean out machines. I watched him sweep the floor. By the way, he had a few employees in there. You know, he wasn't the only guy there. But he's doing all this stuff. He washed the dishes. He did all of that. And I came back, you know, a week later. I like to get my coffee once a week. I came back a week later and I asked him about that. And he told me, you know, how am I going to run this business successfully? You know, how can I truly understand what is going on in my business if I haven't done each of these jobs myself? I should be able to run this completely, because that way I understand what my people are going through. You know, just a really powerful message, not just for me, but for them. You know, they saw him there and they saw that he could relate to them. And just a great example. The next thing about creating an environment for individual success is helping people find meaning. People want to be part of something meaningful. And, you know, I think everybody has really seen this, right? Nothing is more powerful than a person that is driven from a heart. If you've seen that person that has such passion, has found true meaning, is so connected to their work, it seems like nothing can stop them. And such a strong thing. The next thing you want to do is you want to be able to remove barriers for your people. And this is bigger than just simply asking, how can I help? What can I do for you? It's all about anticipation. It's all about being in there with your team, having your finger on the pulse, knowing the vibe of your team, being aware of the circumstances and team sentiment as things unfold, because you want to see these barriers before they get there. If you're asking, how can I help with that barrier, you're already a little bit too late. So you want your leaders to just be really aware of what's going on, and that way they can be out in front, they can help their team face and solve the problems that slow them down. And, you know, I'm talking about leaders here, but this goes through the organization. You know, you want your senior management to be there. You want to be there as an HR professional, because oftentimes the people that have the ability to help people out and remove barriers aren't necessarily the direct leader. So as an organization, you want everybody to really understand the pulse, to be really engaged with it. And when I talk about removing barriers, it could be a couple things. First of all, it can be real obstacles you're going to want to clear the path. You want to be able to change some processes that are very difficult, they're getting in the way. Maybe find other resources that help them out. Maybe you can remove bottlenecks that are based on control or ego. Things like that are very real. And those are the kind of barriers that you should be aware of, and you want to help people get beyond, help remove them for people. But there's another type of barrier that you can help with. It can also be mindset. And you want your leaders to be able to understand and be in tune with the internal emotions of each team member. You want them to understand what emotions are holding the team member back and what emotions are helping propel them to success. You want your leaders to be able to help their team members work through negative mindsets. You want them to encourage new patterns of thinking. So the two kinds of barriers, you have the, kind of the work barriers, but the mindset barriers are just as important. And you want to be able to be out in front of those and anticipate those. The next thing that's huge here is emphasizing growth. And there's a couple things, again, that really go into this. First of all, you want to have high standards. You want your leaders to have high standards both for themselves, but also for their people. And what happens is people will tend to strive for the standards that are set for them. So if you set your standards low, you're really doing a disservice, because they're going to hit those standards and many of them are going to stop there. And so they're not going to grow and reach their entire potential. So set those standards high, let them strive, be there, support them as they do it, but let them stretch, let them grow. The other thing to talk about here, when we talk about emphasizing growth, is how we make decisions. And oftentimes there's a dichotomy of decisions. You're either going to make a decision that's for the benefit of the business or for the person. And so what I mean here is often decisions that are made for the benefit of the business will negatively affect the growth of the individual. And let me illustrate this, with an example. And many of us have been there. I've been here countless times. You have a job open up. Say it's the head of a business unit. You have a couple candidates. One candidate is from the outside. He's got 25 years running the business and he's been successful at it. He knows what he's doing. You have candidate B, never run a business. He's an up and comer in your organization. He's been to number 2, all these kind of things, but he's never done it. The safe play here, as we all know, is to hire the first one, to hire candidate A. She's been there, she's done that, she's experienced, she has a great track record, all those kind of things. But what I'm suggesting to you is a better approach is to help team members grow in a way that will positively affect the business. So candidate B, maybe you're taking a risk on hiring them and putting them in that role. But what I'm suggesting that when you take that risk and put people in those positions, and you do it as a matter of practice, you do it over and over and over again, you'll find that the sum of the results is going to be so much better because you made a decision of the employee over the business. And what happens when you make a decision of the person over the business is the business benefits too. When you make the decision of business over the person, oftentimes the person does not. So the smart play there is to go with candidate B. So I have an example of this, from early in my career, and it was very personal to me because it was me. My first job, out of graduate school, my very first HR experience was a corporate role. I worked for about 3 months doing compensation, benefits, just some support work with union negotiations, things like that might sound familiar for a lot of people in this room. After about 3 months of this, 3 months, not very long, my boss calls me in the office and says, we have this HR manager, top spot in a 400-person plant in Indiana. I want you to go there. I want you to be that person. And that's a huge risk. This plant was not performing, but it was a union plant, had a lot of things going on there, and they could have easily hired or even transferred a more seasoned person. But they made the decision to choose a person over the business, and they put me there. And so I went in there, and by the way, I was really undersold on that. It was a much larger mess than anybody ever explained to me, and I think we've all been in that seat. We've all seen that, right? But they took the chance on me. And I went back, a couple weeks later, drove back to the corporate office a couple hours away, and I met with him. And I told him, I said, it's a lot more screwed up than you thought. And, are you sure you're making the right decision here, that you want to take this chance? And his response back to me was, I have a lot of faith and confidence in you. We've trained you. And truth be known, you're not going to mess it up any more than it's already messed up. And so true. But that situation played itself over again in that plant. Of our 7 or 8 top jobs, there's probably 4 or 5 that were people in the same boat as I was. And that plant turned a profit. Went from a huge loss to a profit in a little over a year and became the star of the company. And what happened there is the organization made the decision for the person rather than the business, and it ended up helping and benefiting both. Just a very powerful tool in your arsenal to think of it that way. The next one here is provide encouragement and support. You want to continuously support and cheer others for their hard work and achievements. Very important, and it just goes a long way. The next one, understanding team dynamics. This is a big thing, and we all know this. Epic things are never accomplished by an individual. They're accomplished by a group and accomplished by a team. And so you really want your leaders throughout your organization to be there for their team, to provide that support, their guidance, and their focus. But there's another thing here. You want your leaders to really know the vibe of the team. You want them to feel the team. And what you really want is for them to know when to step in and take the lead and when to let the team run. So you want them to take the lead when there's danger of failure, of catastrophic failure. Little failure is not bad. I talk a lot, and we all know that failure is the best way to learn. But you want your leader to step in when there's true danger there. When things are going good, there's successes, you want your leader to know that and step back so the team can feel the win. You want the team to be able to feel that success. Another great example, a client I've had, somebody I've known for 18 years, is just a master of this. He runs the operations for a really large business today, and he's pretty much stays back. You'll generally find him in the office. I mean, he works hard, don't get me wrong, but he lets his team do their thing. He steps back, he trusts in their abilities, he knows that they're capable, and he's there for support, he's there for questions, guidance, removing barriers, all the things we talked about. But he lets them do their thing until, and I've seen this, the crap hits the fan. Something comes up. It could be something like COVID, or it could be, a bad customer experience. It could be a lot of different things. When those situations comes up, he steps in. The team looks to him, and he steps in, and he's there because he knows the vibe. He knows the team needs him at that moment. It's almost like that Batman light from the cartoons. And I've seen it many, many times. And I have seen few people in my career have as much loyalty from his people as he does. And it's not just people in the organization, it's people that have worked for him in the past. He has this fan club that is just so powerful. And a lot of it is because he really understands the team dynamics, and he leads with compassion and empathy. The final part of this, really creating this environment for individual success, is making the hard decisions. And a lot of times we think about compassion and empathy, and we think about those words I started with, right? We think about soft, accommodating, easy. But you know what? A big part of the heart-based culture, the culture of compassion and empathy, is making the hard decisions, because reality is making hard decisions. If somebody comes in and tells you, we're not going to fire people anymore, that's just not realistic. That is not a culture you can live with for a lot of reasons. You have to make those decisions. And this here might sound counterintuitive, but oftentimes the decision to let somebody go is a very compassionate thing to do, because people don't like to work in jobs that just are constantly frustrating, where there's a constant struggle. People don't like to be that any more than you like them to, even more than you like to see them struggle. It's just not healthy for them. I think if you think back, you've probably seen examples in your own career of somebody that you've had to let go that was relieved? Maybe not in a moment, but the next day or 2 days later, whatever it was, they were relieved, because oftentimes making this decision is a compassionate thing for that person, is also the compassionate thing and the empathetic thing to do for the rest of the team. Because oftentimes that person is just not a good fit in their role, is holding a whole team back. And that creates frustration and struggle for them. That's just not a great thing. So making the hard decisions is not only something you have to do, it's also a very compassionate and empathetic and heart-based thing to do. Now, that being said, it's important to handle these situations in a compassionate way. First of all, and I think this has been part of the Human Resources Manifesto for at least 40 years. But first of all, don't surprise people. You've been preaching this a lot, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's really important that leadership at all level addresses issues as they come up and doesn't wait till a hard decision has to be made. You don't want people to be surprised. And oh, by the way, you want to give people a chance to get better. Isn't that the compassionate thing to do as well? So don't surprise people. But when you do get there, also be very thoughtful on your words. Your leaders should be very thoughtful. They should even practice it. You want that high a level of thinking around this, because words are so important. You want to make sure that you are using words in your conversations that helps keep the dignity of the person intact. You want to be quick and clear. The idea in a conversation, these hard conversations, is to really give them what they need to know, keep it simple, and help them move on quickly. The reality is being on the other side of the table, being the person that's being let go, you don't want to sit there for 10 minutes. That is just not something you want to do. So if you're in a compassionate and empathetic mode, you're not going to put them through that. You want to be quick and clear, straight to the point, help them move on to the next step. Finally, and this is a big one, and this is one of those corporate level decision kind of things. You want to be really careful that you treat people fairly and generously when it comes time to make the hard decisions, move them on. Because, that does show the company has compassion and empathy. And it's going to help drive that culture and drive that beliefs, because people see this. The way it's going to be recognized by other people in a team, they're going to know that the hard decision had to happen, but they're going to see that you handled it and that you allowed the person to exit with grace and dignity, and you help them take that next step in their lives. So very powerful. So I know that principle number 1 was a long one. It's so important that we had to spend a lot of extra time. So now we're going to move on to principle number 2. And that is having influence over authority. So you want leadership throughout the organization to really encourage as opposed to demand. To have a leadership team that's just demanding everything, do this, do that, do this, do that, or you're going to be fired. You know how that works. Again, that's probably another one that's preaching to the choir. You want to have your leadership really going with encouragement, not leveraging their title all the time and saying, do this because I'm the boss. You want them saying, do this because I know you can do it, and I know it's going to grow you. You want those kind of words coming out. You want your leaders to lead with vision, to be able to paint that picture. You want them to guide, acknowledge, and support. And you'll find that leaders that really emphasize influence over authority, these are the type of leaders that find a purpose in bettering the lives of others. Helping people, leading the people in their team to discovery of their own unique powers, their own unique abilities. And you can see that. You can see these leaders, right? You can really see that they measure themselves by the growth and development of the people they lead. How many times have we talked to people, or maybe you are one of these people, who their face just lights up. They get such excitement, such passion going when they talk about people that used to work for them that have accomplished great things. You can just see that excitement, that feeling. They go on and on about it much more than when they talk about how they made the third quarter of 2019. So that's the kind of leadership mentality that you want and a heart-based culture. The question that you really should ask here, and I encourage each of you to go back to your workplace and think about all your leaders with this one question. Would their team follow them if they were a peer? If they had the same title, would the team follow them and respect them? If their answer is yes, then you've got a leader that's really on the right track for a heart-based culture. The third principle, do not tolerate negative behavior. And so what I'm getting at here is you really want your leaders, yourself, your whole HR team, senior management, whoever it is, to understand the pulse, to have an awareness of the team. And so you want to kind of get out in front of issues. You don't want to wait until an issue arises. You want to take care of it before it becomes a conflict. And by having a pulse, it keeps you out of this situation. And this is a situation that as HR people, we know more than probably anybody else. And that is, somebody comes to you, employee says, you know what? Joe's terrible to work with. He's mean, he berates me, he's always putting us down, he's awful. And then as an HR person or as a leader, your leaders are faced with this too. Then you have to go do an investigation. And then you have this conflict that you have to deal with. You end up in conflict resolution. Where you really want to be is you want to be out in front of it. You want to know that Joe's got these issues. And then it allows you to be not a resolver of conflict, but a dismantler of conflict. You want conflict dismantlement, not conflict resolution. So have that awareness, get out in front of it, and then stop the negative behavior patterns. So watch for patterns. So I use Joe as an example. There's some other patterns that you might have: finger pointing, not meeting deadlines, which creates problems for other people, not doing your work right, gossiping, all these kind of things. You want to watch for patterns of that. And as you see it, you want to nip it in the bud. You want to get out in front of it and address it before it develops into this big conflict that you have to go and take drastic actions for. And finally, and this is a pet peeve of mine, and again, something that is quite common, is high performance does not trump toxicity. And how many times have we seen toxic employees, but we keep them around because they are the best performers we have? They drive a lot of sales. They make a lot of profit. They're just really good at the job, so they're untouchable. And I'm telling you, you can't let this happen. If you truly want the heart-based culture, or if you just want a productive culture at all, you can't tolerate toxicity. And I worked with a sales leader one time, and he was a great illustration of this concept. He proved this over and over and over again. So what he found is when he had a toxic salesperson who was a top performer, it's really surprising how often that happens, he would make the move. He would address the issue, make the change, make the hard decision. And what he found was, he lost all those sales from that person, but everybody else in the team made up for it and more. So at the end of the day, he ended up with better sales performance by letting that person go. And I saw examples of this with him bunches of times. It's happened over and over and over and over again. And it really was a guiding principle of his, is he did not tolerate toxicity. He did not tolerate the negative behavior. He got better results as a result of that. The fourth principle, communicate with compassion and empathy. So the first step here is you really want to get in a habit of listening. You want an organization that listens, and you want an organization that stays humble. So you want your leaders throughout all levels to keep an open mind to listening to people's experiences, to their stories, to what's going on, to their emotions, everything. And you want your leaders to avoid the temptation to jump in and offer advice. That's a tendency, right? That comes up in a lot of different fields. It comes up in interpersonal relationships. It comes up in marriage counseling. There's always this tendency to want to jump in and offer advice. But you really have to pause. You have to pause and listen and look for patterns. find these patterns before providing the feedback. Because, you know, oftentimes people are venting, but also if you jump right in, you don't have the full context. So take the time, really listen, look for patterns and understand it. And finally, you want people in your whole organization to really have a humble mindset. You want people to look for the common ground. Find out how they relate to people. What are those common things? And when you start building relationships like that, when you start finding that common ground, it really strengthens the bonds throughout your organization. The second part of this is to be available and to be present. You know, you want your leaders to really themselves have a sound communication pattern. You want the people that work in your organizations to feel free to openly and express themselves. And also you want people to feel free to listen. So, you know, throughout the organization, you want people to be available. You want people to be present. You know, part of creating that psychological safety, part of, you know, having that compassion, that empathy, is to be present when people are talking to you. Don't be checking the email. Don't be checking the texts. You know, don't be looking around for the next person. Be present. And finally, the last part of this, and we talked about this when it came to, you know, having those hard decisions and having those hard conversations, but it really plays out throughout everything you do. And that is be thoughtful with your words. You want your people to really have a high awareness of the emotions and thoughts of others and how your words might affect those emotions and thoughts. So ideally, you know, your leaders are so in tune with that they can choose their words carefully and how they interact with those emotions and the thoughts of other people. So moving on to principle number 5, and you really want to bring an abundant mindset into your culture. The first part about having that abundant mindset is really making helping others the main thing. You know, heart-based leaders just live to help others. And, you know, really in this kind of culture, there's no room for selfishness or greed. But on top of that, when you have an abundant mindset, there is no need for selfishness and greed. You know, there's plenty of success to go around. And so what happens when you have a scarcity mindset, the opposite of the abundant mindset, is you see success as this limited commodity. And so you must hoard it all yourself. And so oftentimes you'll see the leaders that take credit for other people's work or are focused on their own successes. They don't spend the time to help other people on their team be successful. Or even not just leaders, but peers. So when you have an abundant mindset, you really understand that there is plenty to go around and helping others should be the main thing. You know, and again, another great example in my past, you know, I watched as a client, they were a client of mine, but I watched an HR leader and they just had mastered this. Their seemingly entire focus was on how they could help people that work for them, help other leaders, whether it be their peers or other leaders in the organization. This was a top-level HR executive. Their whole focus is on how they can make them better. They would take time to meet with, you know, lower levels of management, and this is a big company. You know, this is like maybe a 3rd or 4th tier manager, and they would take time to meet with them and work with them and spend that time, even if it meant that they weren't working on themselves at that particular moment, because they saw their purpose in life to be helping others. And guess what the results they got out of that were? They were huge. It really just got so much more out of both their employees. They saw their peers grow. They saw employees at lower levels grow. And as a result, they grew in stature throughout the organization. Very powerful. The next part about an abundant mindset is think big. You know, don't be limited by fear. Don't be limited by that scarcity mindset. Think big. Have an impact. You know, you can't have an impact by thinking small. The third part is being optimistic. An optimist is generally happy for others' success. And again, this really gets an abundant mindset. We can celebrate other successes because there's plenty to go around. You know, what happens on the other end of this that you have to watch out for in your culture is people that have the scarcity mindset, they tend to be competitive and resentful. So In a scarcity mindset, somebody else has success, that means I can't have success. And so I'm going to compete with them. I'm going to push them down so that I can have that success. You can't have that. And you won't have that if you have that abundant mindset in your organization. Abundant mindset also embraces change. People that have that abundant mindset appreciate the fact that change has more positive outcomes no matter how challenging it is. So no matter how difficult it is to go through that change, the positive outcomes are going to be so worth it. People that don't have this mindset, the opposite of this, a scarcity mindset, those are people that are just being plagued by fear. They're going to take a really long time, if ever, accepting and buying into change. So again, you want people within your organization to have that abundant mindset because they see the possibilities. And that gets me to the last one. Focus on what is working. Somebody with an abundant mindset will really concentrate on that. Somebody with a scarcity mindset, they're going to adopt a victim mindset, a victim mentality. What that victim mentality ends up doing is it creates stress, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, resentment. Those are all words that I'm sure you do not want to have anywhere near your culture. But that's what the scarcity mindset does, is it creates that. The daily focus of somebody with a scarcity mindset is on what's not working. And we've all seen this. You know, the person that's always complaining, this doesn't work, this process broken. You know, this change will never work because every time we change, it never works. You know, that negative mindset, that victim mindset, corporates shoving another policy down me, I'm never gonna get my job done now. Those kind of things. You want the people that are you want them to focus on what is working. Now, think about that. You know, do you know people that fit both of those? You probably do. You know, I encourage each of you to kind of take time and think about people in your organization at any level that really illustrate the abundant mindset and those that really illustrate the scarcity mindset. Because once you can picture that and put people in your mind, real faces, you're really going to understand this concept, and it's a big one. The next one, and I love abundant mindset, but this one's one of my favorites. That's compassion over compliance. And what I mean compliance, you know, this is something I've seen just throughout my career. So many times, managers, and I'm going to use the word manager here, you know, as opposed to leader for a reason. But so often managers are so focused on making sure people do what they're supposed to do. You know, they're following the rules, the policies, the procedures, that they have their checklists. You know, they watch to make sure they're sitting at their desk. If they're out of town, they even call in and do a bed check to make sure that, you know, they're working at 8 o'clock in the morning. People are so focused on, you know, making sure they follow these policies and procedures, rules, whatever it may be, that they lose sight of the big picture. And so, you know, that's what I mean when I talk about compliance. So what does it mean to have compassion over compliance? First of all, in a culture of compassion and empathy, you really focus on the positive. And what happens in the mind, positive reinforcement is what really leads to change. People change more readily. You know, they do what you want them to do when they have a positive experience. When they have a negative experience, a negative reinforcement, the first instinct of the mind, even subconsciously, is to shut down. You know, they're just going to block out whatever it is. Now, this really does run contrary to what we're used to seeing, you know, in the managerial ranks, right? So many times, you know, we really focus on what's going wrong. We try to address, you know, those problems, and we don't focus on the positive. And along with this, we really need to move our focus, not just to the positive, but to possibilities over problems. So, like I've said, compliance leadership really focuses on adherence. You know, you want to follow these things so we don't have problems. Problems are terrible. They're terrible things. But the reality is problems exist, and problems are going to exist. So when you're really focused on problems, what you're doing to your team, what you're doing in your culture, is you're creating anxiety, stress, resentment. You're limiting employees' ability to be creative and limiting their ability to open up to new possibilities. It is better, you know, rather than do that, it's much better to inspire employees. You want them working from that. You're working from that, I'm inspired. My leader just really creates this desire in me to accomplish things, as opposed to making sure my leader or my manager makes sure that I'm checking off the list. You really want to make sure that your leaders give their teams the room to excel. Finally, you want to focus on strengths. And again, this is something that's counterintuitive. For so many years, and there's been a big movement over the last maybe 10, 15 years, starting to see a more movement towards focusing on strengths. But even today, we see so much focus on weaknesses. We focus on what's going wrong, where you need to get better. And maybe we have different code words for it, right? Maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it's opportunities for improvement, needs improvement, whatever it might be. What that focus does is it forces people to defend themselves. And so you immediately put their mind into defensive mode instead of in a more productive, more constructive mode of figuring out how to make the business better. Now, on the other side of it, what focusing on strengths does is it allows them to grow. And the best example, or my favorite example anyway, that I like to use here is Shaquille O'Neal. And Shaquille O'Neal, as many of you know, is an NBA star. In fact, he was in Orlando during my time there. And, he was just a dominant force of nature. He was this really big dude, still is. And he took that and he developed a great game around it. He was one of the most dominant rebounders and inside post players of his generation. Great interior defender. He had one huge flaw, though. He could not shoot free throws throughout the entirety of his career. Just terrible at shooting free throws. Now, quote unquote, conventional wisdom would say, okay, Shaq should be working on his free throws. So what would have happened if early in his career, that's what he did? If he had spent all his time trying to fix his free throw shooting and became, a decent free throw shooter? Well, he would have missed out on the greatness, right? Because he wouldn't have been the great interior player that he was. He wouldn't have been the great rebounder. The stuff that made him great would not have been there. But he would have solved his weakness. So focus on strengths. So the next principle, learning from others. Heart-based leaders understand that they can learn from others and they can lead even more effectively. By the same token, those on the other side of this, the leaders that think they know everything, they harden themselves against new ideas. So you want really the first one, right? You want leaders that are going to continue to grow and evolve and have that growth mindset, not the know-it-all. So you want a culture that really encourages your leaders or anybody throughout the organization to continually seek feedback, to be humble and modest. Now, I'm going to warn you, for leaders, this is a hard thing. So this next concept, team growth, is an extension of leader growth. This is a huge thing, but it's so difficult for leaders. Why? Because they're leaders. As leaders, they're expected to know everything. Now, granted, that's the expectation they're probably putting on themselves, but so many of them have it. So many leaders just, it's difficult for them to talk to their people and try to learn from somebody that's underneath them, or even learn from their peers, because they've been brought up to believe that, they're the leader. They should know everything. They should be the subject matter expert. So you're really going to have to work with your leaders and change this mindset that true growth comes from all sides. Growth is a 360-degree thing. It doesn't just come from above. The last principle, trust is not an entitlement. And so what you really need to do here throughout your culture is there has to be a general understanding that people are complex. Their view of a situation is going to be based on years of programming, oftentimes back to their childhood years. And everybody has different programming. So you got to understand those complexities. And with those complexities in mind, there really needs to be a focus on transparency. So when you make decisions, you really want to be transparent about this. You want to show people how the decision was made and you want to show them how it's going to affect them, because they've had all this program, all this complexity. For them to process it, they need to understand this stuff. If you don't do this, what oftentimes comes about it is the perception that you really don't know why the decision was made, or you're haphazard about it, or you just don't want to hear them whine. Whatever it is, it's not a good look. So you want to be very transparent and open about your decision making, and understand that they're all coming from a different place. And another big thing, and this is a quote I heard just the other day. And what it was, and I'm probably messing it up, but I'll give you the general gist of it, is if you have a leader that says, trust me, that's the last leader you should trust. And the idea here is, trust is not something you're entitled to. Just because you're a leader, trust is earned. And you want to really drive that through your culture. A huge part of heart-based culture is having your entire team understand that trust is not entitlement, trust is earned. So those are the 8 principles. Now I want to spend a little bit of time and give you some quick tips with the remainder of our time here on how you can really make it a part of your culture. So the first thing to do is really make compassion and empathy part of the daily discussion. So you really want to make sure that your leaders know that compassion and empathy matter. And this is another thing that gets into that programming. A lot of leaders, they all come from different backgrounds. They're trained by a lot of different people, a lot of people that aren't you, that aren't your company. And so sometimes you have to untrain that. And so you really want them to know that compassion and empathy isn't just something nice, but it's something that matters. And you really want to spend some time with this, because a lot of times your managers, and again, I'm using that different term, but managers will focus on task skills like planning, monitoring, reading TPS reports, whatever it might be, right? Because that's their comfort zone. Something like compassion and empathy might be outside the comfort zone. And you really want to get them out there. So you want to have those conversations and push that, because nothing epic ever comes out of your comfort zone. Secondly, you want to really support and recognize. And you want to be out there. And again, this is part of having that vibe. You as an HR leader and your senior team want to have that vibe, and you want to see examples of when there's compassion and empathy out there, and you want to recognize it. You want to point it out. You want to show how it ties to workplace success. You want to make that connection between being part of the culture and being successful. It's so powerful. You also want to be out there and you want to teach skills. And, be wary of just going out there and like teaching some class on compassion and empathy. If you really want to make an impact, you've got to drive it through everything you do. You got to make it part of the everyday existence. You can't just tell them, here's compassion and empathy, go do it. You want to make it incorporated through everything. And what does everything mean? Well, here's a few things. First of all, incorporate it into sales. Like I mentioned earlier, there's nothing more powerful than compassion and empathy with a customer. So by the same token, customer service. What a great place and a great opportunity to use compassion and empathy than when you're dealing with a customer that's got an issue. This will really drive loyalty and engagement. Incorporate it in your training. And very important, incorporate it in your leadership development. So, driving these kind of changes to your leadership is so powerful because they impact everybody. But to just go out there and teach them compassion and empathy isn't going to work, because they'll forget it. They'll learn it, and it's just not part of their daily life. So you want to build the heart-based culture. You want to build those 8 principles into your other trainings. You want to build it into performance management, build it into hiring, difficult conversations, goal setting, delegation. I left a couple blank bullets in there because everybody's got different things. But really incorporate that compassion and that empathy, that heart-based principles into every aspect of leadership development. Because when it becomes part of their daily routine, that's when it has a true result. It becomes a habit for them. All right, I have some homework. First of all, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, Wade Thomas. And I want you to tell me in there what you will work on first, because I don't want this again to be one of your talks. One thing that you throw in your bag and you just take it back with you to prove that you were there. I want you to actually make a difference in your organization. So connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you're going to be working on first. Finally, I have a bonus for you today. I'm offering my free ebook, From the Heart. It's going to be available on Amazon shortly. I'm offering to you for free. There's 3 ways you can get it. First of all is connect with me on LinkedIn, which, by the way, you should be doing as part of your homework anyway. Second, you can email me, or you can visit my website. It's all right there. And also, in addition to LinkedIn, I'm also on Facebook, so you can connect with me on Aim to Win, or on the Instagrams, on _Wade_Thomas. So again, it's really my passion and my biggest hope that you take this back to your organization and that you help make a difference, not only in a world, but in a competitive advantage of your business.